morning, everyone, and thank you again for joining us for the second day of the workshop series about internal communications and celebrating research success. This is the workshop within the EXtremeClimTwin project, and we're happy to be hosting it for 3 days. We broke one long workshop day into 3 days, and this is the second day, which is devoted to peer review processes. Luckily, we have wonderful partner, Loughborough University, and experienced colleagues who will share experience, knowledge, best practices from their university, and we will be happy to learn with them and from them. But besides the experiences from Loughborough University, we will hear some experiences from the Faculty of Sciences, which I will gladly present today to you. We have a quite dense agenda. We will have speaker from Loughborough University, is Professor Stephen Rice, who will talk about the importance of peer review, school operations, and research culture, which may be somewhat new to us. We have our colleague Adam Woods, who is contracts manager at Loughborough University. We have Claire Edwards, our colleague, who is research development manager from Loughborough University, and myself included. That's the speakers for today. Thank you. Please participate actively, share your views, opinions, join in with your comments. We have a dedicated session with questions and answers at the very end, but time permitting, our speakers will be glad to answer any questions on the go. It's really important for us to hear you, and please, let's use this platform as platform for exchange of ideas and opinions and overall improvements, not only on the topic, but our personal growth as well. Without much further ado, I would like to again call our coordinator, Professor Biljana Vaserin, to say hi to you all and announce a VIP speaker for today as well. So Biljana, good morning. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Goga. Thanks everyone for being today here with us. This is the second day of the workshop, and as Goga said, we are very happy that you're here, and I personally am very happy to see that we have more than 15 participants and a lot of people from our faculty, which means that actually we are reaching out and we are connecting with others. Today with us is our team member, Professor Slobodan Markovic. He is a member of Serbian Academy of Sciences and Arts, and he has a vast experience in peer-reviewed processes and making good connections and networks. And we would like to hear his view on this, and maybe some advice on how to develop the peer review process further in our faculty. So Professor Markovic, please, I would like to ask you to present your experience. Thank you.
Thanks, Biljana. First of all, I think that I'm not VIP speaker. You will see that my presentation is nothing special, but I hope that this presentation can help that we can better understand each other. All of us, we know very well what's mean peer review process. This is some procedure which helps to publisher to ensure the quality of the published papers. But the problem in small scientific communities like Serbian communities that we have on some levels lack of pure peer review process, especially in the local national levels. So that can be quite big problem in some levels of the academic activities. For example, in our field in geography, I'm basically educated as a geographer. A long time paradigm that geography is local science completely prevailed. That's mean if this science is local, this is not science, because science couldn't be local. But in communistic time, our regime like to have controlled professors of geography, and they should say that former Yugoslavia was the most beautiful and best country in the world. If you want to say it, you cannot be pure scientist, because our country is beautiful, but not the most beautiful and not the best one in the world. So my first experience with peer review process was quite frustrating. I was 34 years old. Nobody couldn't help me to solve, first of all, technical limitations related to submission of the paper. I spent almost 3 weeks to upload all files necessary for submission. And later on, when I give really my best, first of all, to write it, and later on to submit it, I received I think this manuscript had about 18 pages, and I received review on 14 pages. So I was really close to give up completely from the scientific research. And I believe that I was not able in this time to answer those questions. But finally, in geosciences, pressure and time, making some advances. So I decided to follow this sentence of the Charles Lyell, who say that pressure and time will change everything. And finally, I decided later on to serve many times, more than 18 times, as guest editor in leading peer-reviewed journals, just to help people, young researchers who coming from our country and also from countries similar like Serbia is. So I saw that my mission can be to help young people and encourage them to do research, proper research, and to using advances of the peer review process to publish their publications and to use these reviews as a useful chance to improve it. I hope that I didn't help my PhD students just to suffer in the dust, because we work on dusty geological records. Most of them are always dirty and coughing, usually because of many particles, small particles inside of their inland. But they are also, I should say, I'm very proud that they are one of the most successful members of the geoscience community in Serbia. I would like to say this is not too hard, because this community is not the best one. But anyway, I'm proud that that my PhD students did some advances in this field. And I think that most important opportunity to do it comes from our idea and our decision to always publish our results only in the peer-reviewed journals. This is way how to compare our knowledge and our quality with other people in the world. And I think this is only one way to improve. Additionally, I would like to say that networking is quite important. Networking which promotes such approach like peer review process. For example, my first contacts with this world happened when I became a Humboldt Fellow at University in Bayreuth. And for the first time, I saw the many papers. For example, I had a problem in the custom because I bring 4 suitcases full of papers, because at that time we didn't have access to the main, the portals of the most important publishers. So since that time, I have published more than 180 articles in peer-reviewed journals. And this networking was quite important for me, because I have co-authors, more than 600 different co-authors, and believe or not, I know all them personally. So this is quite big number of people. So I never I never publish paper like CERN community that we have 1,000 people and we know just few percent of these co-authors. I think we all in our community communicate very well. And I'm also very proud that my students, PhD, former students, some of them now they are professors and coordinators of this project. They are full members of the international communities, and I think time to time I'm thinking, does my work has any sense? But when I see success of my PhD students and the level of their incorporation to the international scientific community, I'm very satisfied, and I really feel very peacefully. So from my point of view, this project, EXtremeClimTwin, is an amazing opportunity for our young scholars to qualify adequately for rules of the peer-reviewed scientific world, especially in the time of pandemic. Because usually pandemic can be chance for some of our young people. We don't have problems with money because we don't have money. Usually, so if you don't have money, you don't have problems. But now when we have majority of the meetings using these technological advantages, I think this is even better chance. Somehow we need to use our opportunities in any case. And I think that EXtremeClimTwin will show complete purpose of this project in the sense that our young students, beginners in the scientific research, have an excellent opportunity to share knowledge and experience with colleagues from much more better developed groups. And I think this is unique opportunities, and I will advise to all our younger colleagues to use it. Thanks. If you have any questions, I will be happy to try to give you answers.
Thank you so much, Professor. This is very encouraging in the first place, I would say. And I'm really sorry that there are no more PhD students who should have heard you this morning, but this and your presentation, both and this recording will be available on our website and our YouTube channel, and we will definitely follow up with a lot of recommendations for them to have a look. Biljana, would you like to say something before we move on and see if the next speaker is available?
I would like just to say thank you, Professor Markovic, for these kind words, and hopefully following your example in the peer review processes and science, we will reach the scientific excellence that we are actually looking for. So hopefully in the future we will be the ones who will say, okay, our PhD students are now coordinators. So this is really nice. This is really kind. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm really personally very much looking forward to the next presentation, but I don't know if the speaker is available at the moment.
He's having some problems logging in, so I'm just trying to sort that out. So if everyone wants to just take 5 minutes to just grab a coffee or have a little walk around maybe, and I'll just try and get him sorted, okay?
Yeah, we wanted to secure the meeting by authorizing access.
Because I'm again with this beautiful workshop like yesterday, and thank you so much for the host and for the presenters. And I would say special thanks for Professor Markovic, member of the Serbian Academy Science and Arts. He said everything correct, and I learned because I'm not PhD student of Professor, but I learned many things from them, because he is one of the best and he is the first who recognized the opportunity and possibility to publish a lot of papers in international journals and fully recognized it. Thank you, Professor, for that. And the Professor said everything correct about stage and possibility of Serbian geography. And if Serbian geography must to live, we must to change, especially me, because the peer review process is difficult, and now you can see the many papers going to be fully open access, and that's the main problem, to find a foundation for this, or to find funding and to publish on those papers. And if, for example, if you don't have project for this to support, it is difficult to find money because now I read something about MDPI. MDPI now is the third placed company, and now is the better than Taylor and Francis, for example. And this is the company with too many opportunity. But when I said about this company to my colleagues, he said, this is the very luck to publish them. This is the only necessary to pay. I think that this is not actually like my colleagues thinks, because we have now almost all world in process of peer-reviewed papers, journals. Sorry. For example, I heard two months ago about Russian geography. Russian agreed to publish more and more. Russian community and Russian scientists agreed to publish more and more papers, also in peer-reviewed papers from Thomson Reuters list. That's the new contingent on the new participants and new scientists. And how is look Russian science and how is big Russian science. And thank you, Professor, for your kind words. And I try to learn more from you and from your PhD students like Tin Lukic, Biljana Bastar, and Vujacic. And you are really good, and I wish you all the best. And in the future, and I believe that you, together with your students, do a lot of things in science. Thank you once again.
Can I say just one word? For me, peer review process is chance for all of us, because, for example, it is much harder to publish in papers of in journals of Russian Academy of Sciences than, for example, in the best ranking journals in a peer-reviewed world. This is similar also in our case. Long time ago, for me, it was much easier to publish paper in Air Science Reviews journal, which has impact factor 10, than in Serbian Geographical Bulletin, because editor-in-chief didn't like me somehow. So
yeah. But this is the private. This is the private. Yes. This is not science.
Yes,
sorry.
but we need to avoid that and to give chance to everybody to do fair science.
Yeah, of course. Thank you once again.
Thanks.
Thank you, Professor. Thanks.
As we are talking about peer review processes, it doesn't have to necessarily, and it does not, within this framework of this workshop, that it does not refer only to scientific peer review. This brings me to a question for Adam and Claire, and my colleagues from Faculty of Philosophy. Why not? Did you go through any peer review process? Do you have something in place for a research supporting officer, some kind of evaluation? Claire, Adam, please, any thoughts on that?
Adam, do you mind just stepping in? I'm just trying to sort Steve out.
Okay.
Still started, Steve. So is this related to how our work goes? So for example, when we developed this proposal,
Exactly, yeah.
In the loosest sense of the term, so in the research office, we're not generally involved in projects other than assisting academics to develop the proposal and then manage the project once the award's been made. So I think when we looked at developing this, Claire's very experienced anyway as a research development manager. So she would generally be the one that would assist the academic to get it to the peer review stage, whereas I looked at this more from a process, how to do things in the research office angle. So we didn't have a formal peer review process for this proposal, but there were a number of people involved so while we didn't fill in forms and that sort of thing and log the outcome, then we did have a sort of collaborative working method to ensure that what we submitted to you was up to standard, let's say.
Okay, thanks. And when it comes to our work, like you, contracts manager, and Claire, a research development manager, have you ever had some kind of external evaluation of your performance, some KPIs for you, like indicators of your success and your progress as experts in the area. I sometimes wish I had some kind of peer review and some external evaluation of this office work, you know. This is what I had in mind with my question, but I understood.
So no, we've never done anything like that. The only time I've managed to get anything like that is when I'm doing a part-time MBA, and I did what's called a 360 feedback session, where all my colleagues gave feedback to me about my performance and what I'm good at, what I'm bad at, those kind of things. And that's the only time, but we don't do it as a matter of course around that.
Yeah. It would be kind of cool to have such a quality feedback.
I think it's really effective. It just makes you look at yourself differently.
Exactly.
I've spoken to Steve and he's really struggling, so we're going to switch things around. So Adam, do you want to do your presentation first while we try and get Steve in the room?
Okay, all right, that we can do that, of course. Yeah. So
okay, bear with me. I'll just need to load something.
Yeah, I'll just announce the title of your presentation until you put it up. Adam is, as I said, research contract manager from Loughborough University, and he will talk about peer review as part of the proposal workflow, which is a very, very important moment in drafting and submitting the proposal. So Adam, the floor is yours, and thank you. Thank you, Claire, for switching things around. And we'll see Professor Rice in a different time slot.
So I'm just seeing if I can share my screen, bear with me.
Absolutely. I think Miroslav gave you the co-hosting option.
Yeah, it looks promising this time, Miroslav. So let's see if we can.
Yeah, it's working.
Perfect.
That working, okay.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks. Great.
Okay, can we all see this?
Yeah, we're good. Thank you. Perfect.
Okay, so first of all, I'll just give a brief introduction, I think. So Goga's introduced myself as a research contract manager. I actually joined Loughborough University as a research support team leader in March 2019. Prior to that, I worked at another local university in the East Midlands as well for a number of years. So I suppose looking at this project, I've got the best of both worlds, because as a research support team leader, I did a lot of the budget development, which we'll be discussing tomorrow. So I've used the systems that side of the office use as well. And initially my role did include contracts, but we decided to split that out from the general team leader role and separate the two roles. So that's a little bit of history so I can speak about a number of different things. So at Loughborough, we use what we call a gatekeeper approach. So there are a number of internal processes we have to follow, and peer review is one of these. As I said, we'll be talking about financial approvals, which I imagine is common with Serbia, that you need to get budgets approved before we submit them. So in the research office, we receive a notification when bids are submitted, and generally we hold those in an approval pool before they are allowed to go to the funder. And at that point, we can check whether all the internal approvals are in place. So the ones that I've just discussed being the main ones. And we do this for a number of different funders. So our main funder is UK Research Council funding. I think Steve Rothberg touched on that a little bit yesterday about that government funding we receive. But we also work with a lot of charities, and then also the European Commission, which once again, as Steve said, our future involvement is yet to be determined to a degree on that. So there's some of the funders we work with, and as I say, these bids, without everything, all the boxes being ticked, we don't generally release them. If we do work on exceptions from time to time when something goes wrong, but as a general rule, we won't release that bid to the funder until we're happy with it. And as I put at the bottom there, the process isn't perfect. We don't cover all of the research submission portals, and also what we do experience is when we're not the lead organisation, other universities, for example, could submit figures on our behalf, which we have no real control about. So we would obviously have to deal with that after the event. So to give a bit of history, and this was again before I joined Loughborough, but I believe before around about 2015, there was no formal process at all within the university, which may be similar to where you're at the moment, or you may be part way along the process, which I think Goga will be talking about. But a process was put in place where we would integrate a peer review tick box into one of our systems, which is the Costing, Price and Management System, or CPAM as we call it. So that's a financial system that we use at Loughborough, and essentially it will notify the Associate Dean for Research. So one of those being Steve, who we're hoping to get online shortly. Steve's the ADR for Social Sciences, and they receive a notification that peer reviews required. And round about the 2015 time, I remember there were some communications from some of the major funders about the quality of bids that were being submitted. So bids that were going in with incorrect budgets, for example, bids that didn't address the call. So there were some emails came to all the universities at that time asking that all bids could be reviewed a bit more stringently in order to improve that quality of the submission. So in the research office, we would then wait until that designated school contact, usually the ADR, had actually logged in, and then they tick a box within the system, and then they write certain notes on there. So it'll either approve or reject the bid to say that that process has taken place. And until that's been done, there was no way we could then continue with the financial submission. If we attempted to introduce the budget form into the workflow, the system would just flash up an error saying that peer review is still required on this. And because of that, it was decided as an organisational decision that we'd move away from this process, because in the research office, we ask for a minimum of 2 weeks notice before the bid is due to be submitted. So if you imagine then we have to get 2 processes through within that 2 weeks, but one is dependent on the other. So if the peer review process took a length of time for that to be complete, we might then only be, allow insufficient time for the finances. So the financial approvals, dependent on the level of the bid, might have to go through multiple steps, which we then didn't have time to complete. So that's the sort of history. And here, this is just an example of one of our screens. So this is our internal system, and we can see here that the department is geography, and the peer review was required, but then we can also see that it would have been Steve in this case has approved it, and with the date there, and any outcome notes that Steve's chosen to record there for future reference. What we will see tomorrow a little bit more about this system that we use at Loughborough from a financial budget building perspective, but this almost is a bolt on to that process. Okay, so as I say, we did change the process. We then moved so we would automatically default to a position saying peer review was not required in the financial system. That's not to say that peer review wasn't required at all. It was just we moved it away from that finance system. And it resulted in faster submissions, less last minute running around asking, ringing people saying, can you fill this in? I need to get this through today. So it reduced the stress levels for us, certainly in the research office. And then, but we had to have alternative processes in place because we didn't want anything to get through without this vital peer review process being completed. So we obviously had to then work out different ways to work with our ADRs, with our colleagues in the schools, to ensure this was being complete. And the process primarily relies on the initial request for support form that we ask all academics to submit. So this is, and again, we'll be covering this from a financial angle tomorrow, but this is what notifies the relevant people that a bid is being developed. So both within the research office, so for example, the research development managers, it will also notify the people in the school who, that can be the Associate Dean for Research from a peer review angle, but it can also be the operations manager from a financial approval. So how does that look? So what we'll see on screen here is actually the submission that Rob made when he notified me of this project. So we can see here the academic, and we can also see there that the distribution list of that form, we can see who it's gone to. In this case, it didn't actually go to Claire, although Rob got Claire involved separately because geography is a little bit of a sort of, it sits in the middle of a couple of areas at Loughborough. So it's gone to a different research development manager, Kelly, but Claire was also involved by request. It's also then gone to the school, as we can see with Suzanne Dexter, who was the operations manager. So this is the initial trigger point for all bids. So at that point, Steve knows there's a bid coming in, and Steve can then begin that internal chasing process to say, Rob, does this need peer review? In this case, I don't think Steve would have insisted on peer review because it's a consortium bid with various international partners, so the quality should naturally be built in there. Whereas if we were the lead organisation submitting this, he would have certainly insisted on that step. The actual form there as well, what I would say is this is just a snapshot of the top of the form. It is considerably more lengthy when we get to the resources required to deliver the project, but it just gives you a little bit of a flavour there. So we still need to obviously check a number of things. We need to check the quality, we need to check the finances. So although we've moved away from using the CPAM system as a workflow to ensure that peer review is complete, we do still record the approvals on there and store those documents. And we've worked collaboratively with some of the ADRs. So because they were using some of the CPAM notifications as a trigger point to enable them to manage their workload, to work what they've done, we share some of our internal resources, our spreadsheets and the such like with the ADRs if they need that, to save using notebooks, that sort of thing. And as I hinted previously, if we get to the point where we haven't got that approval in writing, we do have an escalation process. So if it was related to peer review, we would, for example, involve Claire, who's probably been involved with the academic in writing the bid. So we'll have an idea then that the bid has got quality or not, as the case may be. And by the same token, if we hadn't got the financial approval, we can usually get the go ahead from somebody else if we're stuck in that position. That's just a quick screenshot of how we do store documents. So we can see here, this is the email giving the peer review approval. We can also see that there's what we call an RX2, which is the financial approvals side by side with that. So that is how we do it at Loughborough currently. I wouldn't say it's a perfect process, but it probably gives you a little bit of an idea about how we've had to adapt our process from nothing to one that sort of worked but didn't quite, to what we have now, which is hopefully a little bit better. But again, it's not to say that that system is the only one way of doing it. It's just one system. So that's all I've got to talk about on the actual process of it. So if anybody's got any questions, I'll just stop sharing my screen and hope it goes back to normal, which it has. So if you've got any questions, shout up.
Thank you so much, Adam. This was so wonderful to see from our perspective what looks like a very smooth process. I can only say I wish we had this, the procedures and the backup system, the supporting system, the electronic form, a simple one just to fill out and report to somebody that you as a researcher and a member of the faculty wish to submit a proposal. This is, honestly speaking, a battle that both Vice Dean for Science and myself we've been waging this war, but hopefully we're getting there sometime soon, because this is in a work in progress, and I'll be talking about that a bit later.
I mean, the actual form, it is, I think it's, my understanding is it's a Microsoft form, which is hosted on a web platform, but I think there's some additional clever stuff happens in the background to work out the distribution list, which I think we had to get IT involved. But the main thing is as well, so when I joined, I was, as I say, I was in social sciences and I worked very closely with Steve. So it's that dialogue and collaborative working to ensure, you know, we both know what's going on, and we don't let any academics down by letting things slip through the nets, really, I think was the key learning there.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think that the key word was gatekeeping, because quite often, even though we tend to trust all the research community, there may be something just slipping below the radar, and that is not good. And it would be nice to have more of gatekeeping procedures in order. But yeah, okay, we are learning, we're on the learning curve, and we'll be there sometime soon, I guess. Dear colleagues, any questions for Adam right now? Or if you don't have, don't have any questions now, we can save them for Q&A session later on. But please, your comments, your ideas are really welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. What do researchers say? Would this be a burden for you to have additional kind of obligation to go through a timely and pertinent peer review process? Because time is of essence here, and quite often we meet we see things that we should have done something yesterday, right? And it's always in the nick of time that some proposals are on our tables, and it's impossible to do peer review. Would you be happier with a stricter process in your institutions? Biljana, please.
Yes, for me personally, yes, it would be very hard to be a peer reviewer for somebody else. But on the other hand, I would like to get an opinion from other people. So reciprocity. So I have to give something to get something back. So yes, I would invest my time in peer reviewing process just because I would like to get feedback from my colleagues. And maybe if we do this peer review here at the Faculty of Sciences, we can then get the feedback from the people, for example, from the dean and vice deans, about the people who we can connect with, because we are somehow, I really don't know much about what everyone else is doing, and there are others who can tell me, okay, this is really interesting, but please talk to this group, research group from, I don't know, physics or mathematics or chemistry or biology. They also have some research similar to yours, and connect and make a better proposal. So yes, I would invest my time, even though it's hard sometimes, just because I would like to have also feedback on my, for example, proposal or a paper or whatever research stuff we are doing. So yes.
Thank you so much. So you can be a valuable helper on the go when we are trying to make these procedures. Thank you so much. And Suzanne, would you be kind to save the questions for later? Because okay. We should, I'm sorry for this, but we can continue in Q&A session afterwards. Why? Because Professor Stephen Rice has finally joined. Good morning, Professor. Welcome to the workshop.
Hi, everybody. I'm really sorry I was so late.
It's perfectly okay. Yeah, it's good to have you here finally.
I went down some kind of Zoom tunnel that deposited me somewhere bad. But anyway, I'm thanks for being patient.
Yeah, it's good that it brought you back. Thank you for being with us this morning. And I will just announce that you will tell us something more about the peer review processes in place at Loughborough University from your position of School Associate Dean for Research within School of Social Sciences and Humanities at Loughborough University. So, Professor Rice, the floor is yours, and thank you very much.
Thank you for that lovely welcome. So I'm going to share my screen in a moment, but before I start, I think it's really important for me to say that these are processes that we constantly refine, that we are constantly asking questions about. We're always trying to get the right balance between being efficient and not burdening colleagues with too much bureaucratic work. Equally, we know from experience that if we just try to share good practice and ask our colleagues to undertake these processes, while some, like our last speaker, is very keen to do that, some are not keen to do that. So we do find that we need to use a little bit of stick as well as a little bit of carrot, is the UK, the kind of phrase that we use. Is it, you know, we need to push people rather than just try to entice people to do this. And also I really don't think that we have a perfect system. We have a system that works for us, and I really hesitate to try and teach anybody anything remarkable. I mean, I think we have a system that's useful, but I wouldn't assume to expect that it's any better than many other systems that you may already operate, or that that our colleagues in other universities operate. Anyhow, first of all, I'm going to share my screen. and hopefully I'm going to show you a PowerPoint window. Can you just let me know that you can see that?
Yes, it's perfect. Thank you.
Okay, good. So this I thought this might be helpful to begin with. This is a crib sheet, a little infographic that we hand out to new colleagues and that I periodically send around to all colleagues in the school, just to remind them of the process. So we start off at the top where someone maybe has been inspired to think about a grant application, or they've been made aware of a particular scheme. We ask colleagues to we break those schemes down into two main types. We either have schemes which run within the university, which we know there will be a lot of demand for. So lots of people might want to apply for a particular funding scheme, a particular fellowships are a good example of this. And we know that between us, we can't support more than a small number of those applications. Or we know that the funder, the person who's giving out the money, will only allow the university to submit a certain number of applications, maybe 1 or 2 or 3. So we have to run what we call an internal demand management process to decide which of all of the colleagues who are interested in applying we want to support. So that usually follows a particular process which is run from the centre by Claire or Adam or others in the Research and Enterprise Office. And the schools contribute to that by providing the experts to review proposals that come from our school and provide a ranking and an indication of those which we think are best. So that's usually done by myself and some of my senior colleagues who act as research and impact directors within the school. Okay. The alternative in the second row is that an individual comes along and just identifies a grant scheme that they'd like to apply to. And in that case, we undertake peer review within the school ourselves. As Adam explained, the first step is really for colleagues to obtain support, and they do that by filling in an application form, the support my application for funding form, which is online, which alerts all the various people involved to the fact that this is coming through and gives some basic information. I think the bit that I wanted to focus on is once that happens, that alerts me to begin the peer review process. So this diagram, which I put together a few years ago in the center of the screen now, tries to summarize the fact that producing a grant is not just the business and the work of the PI and the writing team. It also involves myself as the ADR and a peer reviewer, or more than a peer reviewer. It involves Adam and Claire and their team in providing support with costings and with rules from the funder about how we might approach the bid. And it also involves the applicants talking to other senior leaders in the school, because the grant that they're applying for might have significant implications for their workload. It might require them to be bought out of other duties, teaching, for example. And in that case, their head of department, head of subject, and the dean may need to approve any such requests. So I focus primarily on peer review. I help with that process of establishing whether there are any significant resource needs, but all of this needs to happen kind of concurrently. And the PI and the writing team sit at the center of that. The peer review process goes on, as Adam explained. Once the financial details, which are on the RX2 form, and the peer review are thoroughly evaluated, then we hopefully see a yes in the decision box and the grant can be submitted. So that's just the overall process. And I just wanted to show you that so that you'd get an idea of that overall process. I'm now going to share another document that lays out some of the principles of our peer review process, so that those yellow circles in the previous diagram. So I'm sorry that this is not a nice PowerPoint. I had 20 minutes or so this morning to pull this together, so I cut and paste from some other documents without preparing a nice presentation, so forgive me for that. Hopefully you're now seeing a Word document. Yeah, give me a thumbs up, somebody. Yeah, yep, brilliant, good, thank you. Okay, so as I explained, why we do peer review primarily because we have applications which are not being managed through a demand management process, and we want to ensure their excellence. I think it's useful to think about why we peer review. Obviously, a key requirement is that we improve the quality of the applications that we submit. We want to make them as competitive as possible, and that's really the primary reason for doing peer review. But also, as your last speaker mentioned, your last colleague mentioned, it's really important that we learn from each other about what makes a good application. And by passing applications around between the writers of them and the peer reviewers, we gradually gain a collective understanding of what a good application looks like by the time that it's finished. So I think that's another important aspect to this. It's a developmental learning exercise. Crucially, it also improves our overall efficiency. We don't want colleagues to be spending a lot of time working hard on grant applications that those with some expertise of the funder or with expertise of the area or some knowledge of what's being funded at the present time and what isn't. We don't want colleagues to make a lot of effort if someone in the school knows that a particular bid is not going to be competitive at the present time. We don't want them to waste their time working on that. We'd rather they were spending their time doing something else. And we don't want to waste the time of our professional support colleagues, Claire, Adam, and all of the others who work extremely hard to support us. We don't want to waste their time supporting bids that we don't think are competitive, that can win in the external competition. So those are the three reasons that we do peer review. This next little block points out that that peer review is our normal process. So my kind of loose target is that we peer review about 80% of all of the applications that come through the school in any given year. But we don't have a quota. We're not that rigorous. That's just my guesstimate of what we do. There are good reasons not to review everything. And there are some good reasons to target particular applications for reviewing, which are listed in that set of bullet points there. So if the PI is in our school rather than in another school at the university or in another university, then it's more likely that we would review the proposal. If the author is an early career researcher or is otherwise inexperienced in applying for grants, we would almost always review their proposal. If the application is large, more than £100,000, we would almost certainly review it, no matter what else. If the grant will generate overheads, which means it brings real income, new income to the school, rather than just covering salaries and so forth, then we would also review it. And finally, if the grant writing team is small, so that they don't have much scope for reviewing the proposal themselves, amongst themselves, then we would also more likely to insist on peer review. So Adam mentioned the idea that I think when this grant came across my desk, when the EXtremeClimTwin grant came across my desk, we didn't review this because it was clear that there was a large consortia of people who were working collectively and being critical about what they were applying for in order to produce the grant. It would be somewhat of a waste of time for us internally to insist on an additional round of review. So I make a decision about whether I think review is valuable, whether I think it's a waste of colleagues' time. And as I say, about 8 times out of 10, I come down on the side of let's peer review it because we think it's valuable overall. So I think it's also useful to think about what the principles of peer review are. And, you know, I have to always be conscious that this is a difficult process for some people. You're making decisions about whether colleagues' grants are going forward or not. And that can be very upsetting. It has implications for their career progress, so on and so forth. So we view it very much as a developmental progress. It's about helping people become better at their jobs. That's my primary purpose. It's not about being a gatekeeper and allowing them access or not to the support of the university. In practice, that's what it amounts to, but in principle, it's about something much bigger. It's about making people better at writing grant applications. So a key principle is that the peer review has to be constructive, it has to be positive, it has to provide critical feedback, it needs to be iterative, and our process is designed to be iterative. It's not simply a very cursory event where, oh, excuse my 11-year-old son who's decided to get out of bed. He's on holiday this week. Sorry about that. It's what was I saying? It's not about it's not a one-off tick box exercise. It's not about asking somebody to just say yes or no, this is good or bad, yes or no, this can be submitted. It's about constructive, positive developmental feedback. The academics who we ask to peer review work within the school are providing a discipline-specific academic intellectual review of the case that's being made from their position of someone who's embedded in that particular field. We also rely on complementary reviews from our research and development managers, Adam, Claire, and others, who in many cases are more than capable of also offering a view on the academic and intellectual content, but who are really unique in being able to evaluate alignment to the scheme priorities, the technical content, and so forth. So our academic colleagues often have very little understanding of the technicalities of particular grant schemes, and we rely on the RDMs to help us with that. So there's a kind of complementary review going on, which isn't as formalized, but which Adam and Claire undertake and feed in. How do we do it? We use a standard form, which I'll show you in a second. We always encourage at least 2 rounds of review. It's very rare that a grant bid comes in and it's ready to be signed off in the first review. So the first round identifies key strengths and weaknesses under several headings, and again, I'll show you that in a moment. And the second round assesses the improvements that have been made and decides whether the improvements that have been made are now adequate and the grant can go forward, or whether it shouldn't really go forward. I think it's best practice that we involve as much interaction between the reviewer and the applicant as possible. We don't assume that the form, the paperwork, the bureaucracy is the end of it. I always write an email to reviewers once they're identified saying, you know, please do fill in the forms because it's necessary for our process, but please don't think that the form itself is the important thing. It's the communication with the grant applicant is the crucial thing. So providing comments in a track change Word document, for example, being open to having multiple conversations over the period of the review process. Again, it's not a tick box exercise. It needs to be more than that. And we choose reviewers. I choose reviewers in consultation with the research and impact directors, which are essentially my deputies in each of the disciplinary units. We're looking for people who have experience of the topic or who have experience of the funder. And we're also conscious not to burden colleagues who are particularly successful. So if we have colleagues who have done really well with a particular funder, it's important not to continuously ask them to review other people's proposals because they're busy people. So we try to make sure that we share the load. That keeps everyone happy. We're conscious of not burdening individuals too much. Let's put it that way. I encourage reviewers from outside of our disciplinary areas where it's appropriate. I think that's important. So we're not necessarily looking for the person who's closest to the applicant in terms of academic interest to review their proposal, because oftentimes they're too close. And it's better to have someone who's more like a real panel member. Grant applications in the UK are usually judged by panels of people who are experts in something, but they're not always going to be experts in the specific field that an academic is applying to work in. So it's useful to have a slightly colder, harder review from someone who isn't too close. So we encourage that. And this is a bit of a lie. We haven't actually got this together yet, but this is something we're working on at the minute, which is that just to help, we have many colleagues spread across the school who regularly review for funders, or they actually are part of the funders organization and they sit on review panels or what are sometimes called peer review colleges. So they have inside information about how the review process actually works within the funding bodies. So keeping an up-to-date list of those people is helpful for us in then identifying key reviewers. I think the last thing I want to say is that if you're going to bother doing peer reviewing, then you have to be strong enough to accept that sometimes you're going to turn people away, that you're going to say, I'm sorry, this is just not competitive. I don't think it's doing you or the rest of our team any good to pursue this grant application at the present time, and that instead we should think about taking this offline for now and working with you to develop it properly for a round in the future. If you're not willing to do that and have those difficult conversations with the authors, then the exercise is kind of pointless, because what we're trying to do is make their applications competitive. Okay. All right, so that's that. And then let me just briefly, in the last few minutes, I don't want to keep you too long, just share one other screen, which is the form that we use. Oh, have I closed it? I think I've closed it. Hold on a second. I need to open it again. And then let me see if I can find it. Still can't find it. Hold on, let me close that to see if this helps. Sorry for the fuss. I'll get there eventually. Too many windows open, too much stuff going on. All right. There we go. Right. Sorry about that. Okay, so this is just to give you an idea what the forms that we use look like, and to show that there's a process. It starts some blurb at the top, just to first of all, to thank people for doing this and to make it clear to people who we're asking to do peer review that we value the effort that they're making. It's time that they take from other responsibilities, which is important collectively for our overall research culture, and so it's important to recognize that. It's got some brief instructions about what we expect. So then there's two parts to the review, as I said, an initial review, and the basic idea is that first of all, we're asking things about the core idea, whether we think it's original, significant, and expressed clearly. What we want to really know is whether the experts think that reviewers of this will be excited by the application, whether we think it's sufficiently new, different, and fundamentally important to excite reviewers' interest. Then obviously we need to be sure that the research design is clear, that it's obvious what the objectives and research questions are, and that there is good alignment between the research objectives or research questions and the methods which are being detailed. Are those methods appropriate for answering the questions? Is it obvious how the methods are being used to answer the questions? Is there anything particularly rigorous or innovative in the methodology that will appeal to reviewers as well? Because that's often something that, as a reviewer, you're asked to comment on. The other thing that we focus on are the resources that people are asking for, because we know that most funding bodies in the UK look carefully at this. They look carefully to see whether the money that's being asked for is sufficient, whether the way that the money is being spent is adequately justified. So if you're going to apply for a postdoctoral research assistant for 2 years, is it completely clear why that person is needed and what they will be doing? If you need to buy a piece of equipment, is it clear why your laboratory already does not have that piece of equipment, etc., etc. So something on that. Another big aspect of funding in the UK, and I'm sure everywhere now, is that we need to be clear on how knowledge exchange will work, what impact will be generated by the research. Are we working with partners and stakeholders outside of academia? The vast majority of UK grant funders require a decent argument about that. So this question is to check on that. And then there's a catch-all question, which is just if we haven't asked you already, are there any other parts of the process of the project that you think are vulnerable to criticism? So most funders in the UK also request information about how a project will be managed, how the information will be disseminated via conferences and papers or books. We don't ask specific questions about that because they're not as important as the 4 questions that we do ask, but we leave space here for reviewers to offer any other comments about those or other things that we haven't picked up. The reviewer then makes a decision. Is this a highly competitive application that is ready for submission almost with some minor revisions? Does it need moderate to major revisions? If it does, then that means that the project should be reviewed again using Part B of the form. Is it unlikely that the bid is competitive or will be competitive even after major revisions? If the reviewer can see straight away that this bid has got too much to do in the time available, then they can reject it at that point. But normally the choice here would be A or B. In the case of A, we just communicate with the applicant directly to say, here are some minor changes you need to make, but once they're done, we'll sign off peer review. In the case of B, where there are moderate to major revisions, then they need to resubmit that again. The reviewer again has a look at the revised proposal and makes one of these decisions, which are similar to those before. So we try to make it a two-stage process to ensure that there's that developmental aspect. There are some other things on the form, but they're not important. I just really wanted to show you the questions and the process overall. So those are the three things that I had to share. I'm not sure if I've covered exactly what you were hoping I would cover. You know, my responsibilities extend to trying to develop research culture across the school. It's a big, complicated school. We have 7 or 8 different disciplines involved that range from the extreme end of STEM with some of our physical geography colleagues. I'm a physical geographer. I study sediment transport in rivers, and obviously you've been working with Rob, so you know all about that. But we go right through to the arts end of humanities. So we have a broad range of different colleagues to try and work with. So that's it really. If you'd like me to ask me any questions, I'm very, very happy to answer them, or about this or other things that we do in the school. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Professor Rice, for a brilliant and very detailed view of the procedures. We really appreciate how honestly you shared your documents and your insights. I'm sure there are questions, and yes, our colleague Miroslav just raised a hand. Miroslav, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Professor, for a great presentation and really useful insight on how you operate. I have like several questions, but first one, how do you motivate peer reviewers to become a part of the process? The other one, is it a blind peer review, or do you announce the name of the peer reviewer? And is every criticism a positive criticism, or is there a collision between the colleagues? Because when you decide, will the application be approved or rejected? And also how the colleagues accept that criticism. So these are the several questions which popped up in my mind.
Professor, please unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, please just call me Steve, everybody.
Right.
I'm sorry to, but please call me Steve. Yeah, so yes, so 4 things, I think. First one, how do we motivate people? We appeal to their better nature. We appeal to senior colleagues that part of their role as a reader or a professor is to support junior colleagues, which is often what we're doing, and more generally to support one another. So they're motivated partly by a sense of responsibility to help one another. And they're also motivated by the knowledge that if they want their grant applications to be the best they can be, they have to rely on other colleagues in the school reviewing their grant applications. So there's a quid pro quo going on. So I think those are the 2 primary ways. We have a standard allowance in our workload model, which divides up colleagues' time between research, teaching, and other responsibilities. We have a standard allowance in our workload model, which gives all colleagues in this school approximately 1/3, 33% of their time for research activity. And that's writing their grant applications, that's writing their papers, but that's also helping each other and reviewing each other's grant proposals. So that's what I remind people of if they say, well, I'm sorry, I'm too busy to help at the present time. Second thing you asked was about whether it's blind. It's not blind. It's a good question, and so far we've decided not to do it blind because we want we want to be honest and transparent, and we want folks to feel as if we're a broad supportive school. We want the reviews that we get back to be honest, but also supportive and positive. And it's hard, it's easier to ensure that that happens if you know that the applicant is going to know who the reviewer is. The reviewer is less likely to say unconstructive, unhelpful things, given that their name is known. We are also kind of just depending on, again, a collective, positive community spirit around the whole event. And again, something I share repeatedly with colleagues in the school are my grant rejections, my own grant rejections every year. I think it's very valuable and positive for everyone in the school to know that those people who they might put on a pedestal and think are particularly strong research grant winners actually have a filing cabinet full of rejections and are getting rejections all the time and are being peer reviewed all of the time and having to deal with the negative criticism and with rejection all of the time. That the process of winning grants is as much, somebody once told me, so a senior American colleague once told me that winning in grant applications is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. All right, you keep trying, you keep going, you try again, you revise it, you resubmit it, you repackage it, and you have to be resilient. So there's an element of encouraging folks to be resilient and take the criticism on the chin and learn and grow from it. However, we also, and this is part of the process, that the final decisions on any rejections come from me, not from the reviewer. So I take responsibility for rejecting the grant. The reviewer makes a recommendation to me that the grant isn't ready to go forward. But in consultation with my deputy in the relevant research area, that person and myself make the final decision and report those negative outcomes to the applicant and have a conversation with them about what we're going to do next. So we don't just send them an email that says, sorry, we're rejecting this, goodbye. We have a conversation with them that says, well, these were the problems. What are we going to do in the next 6 months or the next 12 months to address those problems? What support do you need to do that? Do we need to find you a little bit of pump priming money so that we can demonstrate that your grant idea is a good one? If so, then maybe here are some schemes that you can apply to, or maybe you could come to me when I advertise our own internal funding schemes for seed corn money to generate grant ideas. So, you know, we try to do it in that kind of way. And ultimately, it's my responsibility, not the reviewers, which I suppose is one of the other things that makes reviewers more willing to be involved. I think I've probably covered the general issues around, you know, this potential conflict. So I didn't go through all 4 answers, but I think I've probably covered that.
No, you answered perfectly. And now you're like editor-in-chief and peer reviewers are reviewers, and you shield them in that way. You make the final decision, and it's not the rejection, it's when you just postpone maybe the idea and you give a constructive rejection. Thank you for answers. They're really valuable.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Sergine, I'm sorry for calling you out, but you had a question for the previous session. Maybe you can go ahead now if it's related to Steve's presentation.
It was more some comment about the problem with deadlines, because some colleagues don't have enough understanding about the deadlines. For example, last week we had a deadline for one call for project, and all participants had to got some paper, some proof about the number of papers. And before that, our verificators had to verify all those papers. And I asked all scientists 1 month before a deadline to finish filling up that database. So verificator need enough time to verify all papers. We produce hundreds of papers per year, so they had to verify period of 5 years. And some of researcher request approval of their paper 3 or 4 days before the deadline, and they force a verificator to verify their paper, and they don't understand that the verificator also have other obligation. They are also professor like researcher like them. They also prepare proposal. They also give a lecture and others things, and they don't have enough time to last day to work on that. And some researcher told, okay, we also have a lot of to do. We are very busy, and we don't also have time to fill up the database. So sometimes that is the problem of not understanding each other. So I just want to point on that in that process.
Can I say something about that? Is that okay? So I've worked with academics for a really long time. Steve, don't be offended by what I'm about to say. I worked with academics for a really, really long time. And from my experience, I give them pretend deadlines. So if the real deadline is on a certain date, I tell them it's at least a week before, because I know a lot of them are going to leave it to the last minute or need an extension. So I often make a fake deadline that I tell them is the deadline that's not really the deadline. But Steve, don't listen to what I'm saying. But that overcomes a lot of those problems, because then you've got some contingency built into what you need to do. And also when it comes to proposals, we're quite flexible at Loughborough. So we have a rule that we need to see them 2 days before the deadline so we can check everything. But other universities are much, much stricter. So I think Oxford University, they have to have the proposal finished 2 weeks before the deadline to go through all the checks and approvals and everything they have to do. So there are different things that institutions can apply. So I hope that's useful, but don't tell everyone it's a fake deadline. You have to just pretend it's the real one. That's my advice.
Yeah, I think if I could just add to that, excuse me. So we do have a 2-week deadline in the research office, but in reality, it's very rare that we would ever refuse a piece of work. So I think the process is there to maybe deter people who might be unorganized rather than people who've been told last minute about things. So whenever there is a valid justification, we would generally, with the go ahead from the school, try to progress any bid, and that might be where Steve and I were talking about something last minute to ensure we could actually get it through.
Thank you so much for sharing that human touch. I thought we would never get there. So it's good to know that of course you're flexible and that we are not actually hopeless when it comes to internal deadlines rather than external ones. Thank you so much. Any other comments, ideas? Yes, Miroslav, please.
Once again, one other question to Steve. When you get the project proposal, do you do initial screening? And when you invite the peer reviewers, maybe give them a little focus, like what the application is lacking, excellence part or any impact, or do you give them like open field?
Yeah, that's a good question. It depends. Sometimes I've got time to do that. Sometimes I don't. As with everybody else, I'm super busy, and this is only one of the many things that I have to do. So some days when a proposal comes in, especially if it's from an early career colleague, or if I'm kind of conscious that it's been difficult to find a reviewer, because the field is a bit difficult or it's outside of everyone's expertise and quite a long way away, then I might feel the need to look at it myself and offer some kind of initial advice. But I don't do that as standard. I don't do that as standard, and it's primarily because of time. I just don't have the time to do it. Yeah, it's good. It would be a useful thing to do. Sometimes I'm aware of, because I've had a conversation with the applicant or with the RDMs, with Claire or Kelly or Adam or their colleagues. I've been made aware by them of peculiarities or particularities about the application that we should be conscious of, and I would pass those on in the conversation I have with the reviewer. So it does happen, but there's no formalized part of that process. Yeah, I think the previous question about you know, timing is, there's no perfect solution, and you have to be proactive. We maintain within the school. Adam and I set up a really effective system a few years ago, and that's kind of gone by the wayside, but I'm about to reinstigate it now after the end of the pandemic. I should say, during the pandemic, colleagues were so stretched that we backed off peer review completely. We went from probably 80% to 20% because colleagues had so much to do and they were under so much pressure that we stopped peer reviewing. So I'm winding that up again now. Which is why it was quite easy to pull together some resources for you this morning, because I've been thinking about how we should do it going forward. Before the pandemic, Adam and I had a really helpful spreadsheet and a shared drive, which he and I both had access to, and which I'm about to reinstigate now, which helps me to manage the process. So our school only has maybe 120 academics, but you know, even if 10 or 15 of them are currently working on grant applications, that's too much for my old brain to keep track of. You know, I need a piece of paper with that written down. And with a simple tool like a spreadsheet that's got the basics of the grant and an indication of where we're up to with peer review is really helpful, because each Monday morning I might open that up and see that a peer review for a particular grant hasn't come in yet, and we really need it because the deadline, which is listed in the spreadsheet, is coming up, and I can chase the person to do it. So, you know, you have to have that kind of commitment to proactivity in order to stay on top of it and just to help people meet deadlines. Because I think it's often the case that people aren't lazy. It's not that they don't want to do things. It's just they've got so many other priorities that they forget or they lose track of it. So you have to be willing to send them an email and say, hey, up, we need this now, or by Thursday or whatever. Yeah, but anyway, thanks.
Great, thank you for the answer.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you so much. Thank you for your questions. If you come up with another question, please save it for the Q&A session, and we can always pass them on to Steve. So I'm sure Steve would be glad to answer some of our questions and concerns even after this workshop is finished. Steve, am I right? Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you for your presentation, for your time. And if everybody's okay, we can move on with today's program. Yes, Claire, please.
Oh, I was just clapping.
Yeah,
Okay,
we were
yeah,
just praising. We were just praising.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you so much. Well, since we jumbled the program a little bit, I should be the next one to present about internal processes which are in place at UNSPMF, so Faculty of Sciences. And listening to you guys, my mind is just blowing, because there are so many ideas on how to move on and what to do next. And I'm sure the same process is ongoing in my colleagues' head, in Surgeon's head, actually, who is the Vice Dean for International Collaboration, Science and Development. And there will be definitely something new coming up soon when it comes to improving the processes. I will just share my screen with you and briefly go through the process. Many things have already been said on the go, and I will not repeat. Does everyone see my screen? Is everything okay? Yes, okay. I will just go to slideshow and do the swap of screens. Okay, are we okay now? Yeah, all right. So I just wanted to explain it to myself before commenting on something, and I really wanted to see what the definitions say about peer review. And of course, I guess we all agree that it's a necessary check process by a group of peers and experts in the same field to make sure not only it meets the necessary standards, but it adds value to your research, it adds value to your originality, that it gatekeeps the integrity of science, improves the quality, increases networking possibilities, as our colleague Slobodan said in his presentation and talk. So I'm sure we're on the same page, all of us, when it comes to needing the peer review process, and that it's the right thing to do. As we've already learned, Serbia is a small research community, and when it comes to numbers, it's almost 1,700 people involved this way or another, part-time or full-time equivalent working in research. And this can be either good or bad. It depends on the way you view things. It can be really good because you may know all the possible reviewers and all the possible peers in your field, and even better, if they are your friends, they will offer constructive criticism and really useful peer review. Some people are open to it, some are not. Actually, the situation at the Faculty of Sciences mirrors the one in Serbia as a country, and we as a community of around 450 researchers unfortunately have weak internal peer review culture and procedures, and only random activities as examples of good practice. So clearly there's a lot of room for improvements, and I'm happy to recognize that we're changing through this project, and that it inspires some changes on the go. As far as current practices at the faculty are in place, I would divide them in two segments: researchers to researchers in the first place, and internally, okay? So some good examples of good practices going on at the departmental level in the first place are actually the seminars, which can be held weekly, monthly, or whatever the pace is needed among the colleagues. And seminars really prove to be great platforms for quality discussions among peers. And this is something I bolded and underlined. If a mentor is open enough, this is the human moment of a colleague being open towards constructive criticism or not. Then the mentor invites PhD candidates and even master students to join these seminars and present their ongoing research and unpublished results. Why? Because it opens them to additional comments, assessments of validity, quality, originality of the proposed research. And if we all understand this process as a process of improvement, this is something that could be highly welcome among the younger research population in the university. There are, of course, peer reviews on behalf of the team, but it's the closed groups, you know, when they prepare a research paper that they will all be co-authoring, then quality discussions and brainstorming around project proposals and scientific papers are an ongoing thing at a departmental level, at the group level, at the level of the chair, which is also fun as long as it's purposefully used. There is also one really good example of best practice, which is a memorial scientific meeting on environmental protection. So it's at our Department of Chemistry, Biochemistry, and Environmental Protection, which is actually ongoing now during these very days of our workshop, where PhD candidates present their research papers and unpublished results. This is a very good example of our science and researchers being open to share, to go through the peer review process well before these scientific papers are published and results fully validated. So it's a kind of a corrective measure which help us all be better during the process. On the other hand, when it comes to International Relations Office and Project Office, because we're definitely two in one, we also offer some peer review process to researchers. We offer, but it's not mandatory unless some restrictions come externally, which I will explain shortly. So what we do is the core supporting services which are available: identifying funding opportunities to support research, to support fellowships, to support PhD students in general, research development and support, consistent consultancy, advice and assistance on research compliance and policies, partly contracts and agreements together with the legal office, especially if we go through a grant negotiation procedure like the GAP procedure is in Horizon projects, so grant agreement preparation procedure. We also help in reviewing the consortium agreements, all kinds of agreements, fellowship agreements that the faculty would enter in the framework of the projects. We develop partnerships. We tend to be included and offer some kind of development for researchers, like in acquiring transversal skills in terms of their career development. We will, if we don't offer a seminar or webinar or some kind of educational process ourselves, then we should invite the people from other offices or some other experts to share something with our researchers, all in view of their personal development. And of course, it's our duty, I guess, a duty of all of us to raise the research visibility and overall attractiveness of our institution. When it comes to peer review services only, it's the consultancy, it's creating written guidelines. I'm very happy that during the previous calls, this office managed to offer written guidelines on how to write, for example, some sections of the proposal, how to write a good excellence section, how to write a good impact section, and all the consulting services on the go. So it's the overall coordination of proposals, reading, editing, writing parts of the proposal, drafting uniform sections relating to institution, like, for example, its institutional profile. It's nice when everybody has similar or the same text about the institution, which is up to date, gives the right numbers, gives the right links, and so on and so forth. Then there are some sections which require streamlined actions, like gender equality plan, or there's a section in Horizon Europe which deals with do no significant harm. So there are some general sections of the proposals that simply ask to be streamlined or somehow arranged in advance. And this is something that our office does. And of course, the pre-evaluation of the entire project. I'm the happiest person in the faculty when I get the proposal on time, when the researcher wants to have some kind of a peer review, some kind of external advice, and even better, include the advice and improve the proposal. This is on the voluntary basis, but there are moments when peer review is a must. And this is when we have some externally imposed restrictions, like some funding agencies impose or some programs impose, and so on and so forth. For example, sometimes only one proposal is eligible to be submitted from the Faculty of Sciences, or there will be restriction that only one coordinating role and one partner role is eligible for the institution, or we are eligible to have multiple submissions but single participation, which will lead us to a necessary peer review process afterwards when we need to decide which application will be granted priority over the other. And I'm really happy that we can offer some good practice examples. A couple of years ago, there was an instrument for pre-accession call, and there was a very hard restriction, which is that only one proposal would be eligible for submission on behalf of the institution. And this is how we actually went through the process. The international office created a kind of project ID. It was a very simple Word document circulated to everybody in the institution with an internal deadline for the form to be provided back. At this stage, we wanted only to have those most important information, like who makes the partnership, what kind of budget they have, is co-financing needed, what activities are there, which priority in the call the project belongs to see the relevance, and so on and so forth. So this was just kind of very succinct overview of what the project is all about and what we can expect. That was the first screening. The second screening that was necessary is the meeting with all the colleagues who submitted the form and elaborate discussion on what their proposals are about. And this was a very important step in this peer review process, as we heard the colleagues, we heard elaboration versions of their project ideas, and we're more able to decide what fits more into the criteria of the call itself and what is actually pretty much off the map. The final step was a written report made by myself after having all the insights. So the relevant elaboration from the meeting and the previously provided proposal IDs. This was the final step in deciding which proposal would be given the priority, and this is how we did it. It wasn't a pleasant process, I have to say, but it was really necessary, and judged by the comments, and since we did it all together, we tried to keep the evaluation as impartial as possible, and I was concentrated on actually qualitative as well as technical reviewing of the proposals. There is also one ongoing initiative which proved to be really well in terms of peer review proposal. It's the national competition with the Science Fund, and we just received the results of the first step. During the proposal preparation phase, the office took a very important role in coordination, in pre-evaluation, in consultancy, in editing the proposals, and so on and so forth. And what we are trying to do now is to organize mock interviews for the second stage of the proposal, because this is the second stage in the evaluation. And researchers should really go through a oral presentation and go through that kind of excitement, fear, and articulating their written proposal orally in front of some kind of committee. So I'm looking forward to that stage, and it actually begins on Friday and will be ongoing during the next week. So I really wish we had more of these practices. It's a new responsibility, it's some kind of a burden, because we lack people, but I'm not going to underline that. We all everywhere lack people capable to do the job, but I guess this will change in the future as well. External peer review, you know already as researchers yourself, and you know how the process goes on. But I put this picture because everything that you undergo through the externally reviewed peer review process, you can actually have on a smaller scale in a friendly atmosphere with your peers, with colleagues, and you can actually get rid of the red flags already well before submitting it to somebody who will not be as flexible or full of understanding as your colleagues at the institution may be. So I would encourage you to go for internal rather than straightforwardly external process of peer review. There is an initiative from the European Commission, which is to go for Open Research Europe. And if you mention your willingness or openness to this kind of open peer review process, it will be positively viewed in your application for Horizon Europe, for example. It has pros and cons, like any review process, of course, but there are definitely benefits for researchers because this is an open peer review process which is free, and you can get comments from a widest possible research community about your idea. You can validate your idea and your work well before it's submitted to some places where it's crucially important. It's the benefit for research because it creates a culture of openness, so you can reach more impact in your research, and of course impact builds the benefits for society. And of course we are not doing research for the research sake, we're doing research for the sake of impact and resolving those grand challenges for society. So give it a try. Go and see on this link because we will make these presentations available on the project website. And of course, I put the archive from Cornell University as another research sharing platform reserved only for some scientific disciplines like physics, mathematics, astrophysics, and so on. You can just have a deeper insight afterwards, and you can also submit your work for an open, impartial peer review process. And just to conclude, something that we all know, and I'm sure we all agree, it's that the peer review is an important part of establishing a culture of openness, which we slowly build on the go. I don't think that any institution has it already in place. It's something that is a culture of change and of opening and good scientific conduct, where ideas can be shared, challenged, and questioned to bolster the quality and innovative nature of science. Peer review processes are not always pleasant, but they are necessary and critical, I guess, to improving the quality. With this, I'm wrapping up, and thank you so much for your attention. And I hope that in some next presentation, maybe over the years, there will be more examples of best practices offered by the Faculty of Sciences. And many special thanks to our LAFRO colleagues for sharing their insights. Thank you so much. I will stop sharing my screen. And of course, you can ask the questions in Q&A session. Please save them if you have them for this moment. And maybe we can move on with Claire's presentation because we are kind of running not really late, but tight, I would say. Claire, would you be okay to move on?
Absolutely. So I've got a presentation. I was going to do a bit of a quiz to see what people thought, but there's not so many people here, so I'll skip that and just run through my presentation. So just bear with me a moment, and it'll be quite short. So okay, can everyone see?
Yep.
Cool. Okay, great. So I just want to talk a little bit about good practice in peer review, specifically talking about proposals here and funding applications. The first bit is, as Goga just mentioned, is the difference between formal and informal peer review. So the process that Steve Rice spoke about earlier is quite a formal process, but I'm also a really big fan of informal processes as well. So I work with another school, the School of Science at Loughborough University, and they also have a formal process in place, just like Department of Geography. But we also have informal discussions between colleagues as well, where they, maybe just send a small part of their proposal to a relevant colleague just to chat through their idea or their concept and get some early feedback. And I think that's a really beneficial thing to do before you've gone too far down the line of writing your funding application. So just something to bear in mind. Sometimes those informal conversations are just as helpful as getting a full peer review on your proposal. It's really important to think about who's going to review your proposal. So sometimes you don't have any control over that, but sometimes you can suggest names of people who know your research or know your discipline or whatever it might be, and they might be ideal to review it. It's also important to think about other people outside of academia. So it might be there's there's a research development administrator or person that can help have a look at it from a non-technical perspective and make sure you've met all the requirements of the funder. So it's just really important to really think about who's the right person to review the proposal. What they're reviewing. So I think this is a really important point. So if we particularly think about Horizon Europe proposals here, they're massive. We're talking they're either 45 pages or 70 pages long. That's a lot for somebody to read. So UK Research Council proposals are quite different because they're typically 6 to 8 pages long. There's a real stark difference in terms of that. So I'm a really big fan of not necessarily sending everyone who's reviewing your proposal, if it's a Horizon Europe, the whole 70-page or 45-page proposal in one go. Maybe start with sending them section 1, then a few weeks later send them section 2, then a few weeks later send them section 3. So they're only having to look at maybe 10 or 15 pages at a time. Then once you've done that process, if you want to have a second review, you can send the whole document, but it's less of a job because they've already read it, so it's not such a big demand on their time. If I review an EU proposal, I reckon it takes me most of a day to go through the whole document, make sure it makes sense, make sure everything's right and connected together. So I think just bear in mind what you're sharing at what point. And that comes on to my next thing about when. So as mentioned, the informal discussions are really helpful to happen really early in the process. So months and months before your deadline, I've got this idea and I want to do this, and this is who I'm thinking about working with, so that you can get that feedback nice and early. If you send your full written proposal to somebody a week before your deadline and there's fundamental problems with it, or there's a really big issue, you don't have time to fix it. So it's really important to think about when is the best time to get those reviews and get that feedback from your colleagues. And this is another point where it's really useful to kind of chunk it up as well. So write a section, get it as good as you can, then send that off for somebody to look at while you're working on the next section. So it means that you're not waiting on somebody to come back. You can carry on working on it in the meantime. I'm just going to show you where to find the evaluation form for EU proposals on the participant portal, because I think if you're reviewing an EU proposal, it's quite useful to have the evaluation form in front of you so that you know what you're looking at. So I'll just stop this presentation a moment. And if I go on to the EU portal, which is here, it's under this section, so how to participate. And then it's under reference documents. And then we find Horizon Europe. Here we go. And then here we have all the guidance and templates and forms. So it's just, sorry, it's probably a little bit small. If you select the templates and forms, you've got both the application forms here, but also the evaluation forms. So you can select which evaluation form is correct for the proposal that you're looking at. So whether it's a research and innovation action or an innovation action or a Marie Curie fellowship or whatever it might be. So you can find the evaluation forms there, and then you can just click on them. And you can see the form here. I'll just make it a little bit bigger so you can see. And then this is exactly the form that your evaluators will be filling in and what they're looking for. I went through this in my last presentation a few months ago, so I won't go through it in too much detail again, but it's got all the different sections and you can see what they'd be expected to look for. So I think it's a really sensible idea to use this form for your reviews, for your peer review, so that they're undertaking a similar review and looking out for the same things that your EU reviewers and evaluators would be looking out for. So we can pop that link in the information about the event if that will be helpful for anyone, but it is pretty straightforward to find on the EU system. So back to my presentation, I've just cut out those forms so you can see them, but we've gone through those quickly. And if you want to have a look at it, as I say, just download it and have a read through. I think also when you're writing, it's really helpful to refer back to these anyway, so they're not a bad thing to have on hand. And I just wanted to show you this one. So this is for EPSRC, which is Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council. Sorry, it's a bit tiny. Again, I can send the full thing out if that'd be useful. And this is one of our UK funders, and this is the evaluation form that they're expected to fill in. So as you can see, it's actually kind of quite similar to the EU form in terms of what they're looking for. So they have to make comments on the quality of the proposal, the importance, and the resources and management, so how well it's been resourced in the budget and that kind of thing. And then it's given a score. So similar to the EU one, where each section scored out of 5, the whole proposal for this is scored out of 6. So the reviewers will give it a mark and then say whether they recommend it's funded or not. And then these go off to a panel to review. So I think sometimes it's just helpful to see some other types of forms that you can use for a review. So I think these two, along with the one that Steve showed earlier, are quite helpful resources to be able to pull together your own process or forms to be able to use internally as well. So hopefully that's helpful for you. And that's my speedy presentation, because I'm aware we haven't got loads of time left. So I will stop sharing now. And then we've got time for any questions or comments or discussion or anything. But I do really want to emphasize the informal peer review part, because I think that's really, really important. So there you go. Any questions, any comments? I think you're on mute, Goga. Right.
Thank you. I unmuted myself. Thank you. I just think it's brilliant that you reminded all of us of the evaluation forums that are widely open at Horizon Europe website. And it's a recommendation for all the researchers. Find them yourself. And in parallel, as writing the proposal, just check yourself, have that checklist, which is actually the evaluation form. Why, how to write the parts? Well, to satisfy what the evaluation actually asks from you, not what you think is just super to write in your proposal. Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you for bringing that up. It's a recommendation for all of you. Yeah.
I think, you know, when I talk about this informal peer review, I think academics often have a fear that if they talk about their ideas for research, that other people might steal it. I've never, ever seen that happen. I find my colleagues are really collegiate and really happy to share, and are very unlikely to run off with your project idea. So while I understand people are nervous about that, and I guess very occasionally it might happen, you know, talk to the people that you trust. People like Steve, who's in a position where he's an associate dean for research. He's not going to run off with your idea because he wants you to be successful. So it's thinking about that with who you talk to about your ideas, and, you know, just making sure you have those conversations, because I do think they're really important. So just to add that as well.
Yeah, well, that's also a great point. But yeah, it's not, I mean, unfortunately, majority of people are not aiming for the Nobel Prize, right? So it doesn't really make sense that you don't offer your research or your paper to a closest colleague just for a quick check, or that first validity check. I would do it, for example, if I had a chance, if I were a researcher myself. But yeah, there's that fear of intellectual property theft and unprotectedness, and I don't know, especially if something is patentable. But yeah, I think that this is exactly the developing the culture of openness within the institution that will help us open the research as well. Miroslav, yes, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I wanted to say, well, as you have internal procedures, I see that your idea is well protected. You will have all the timeline when someone is submitted. So it's better to be transparent. So
I think so.
I'm actually happy to see that you have a very developed and finely tuned structure. I heard that you have from Steve research and impact directors, the people who are actually his associates. Well, this is something so nice and so fine that I don't see happening here anytime soon. but it's also a great recommendation to go for that. I mean, those people will not be involved in everything, in all the workload that Steve does, but they will be partially responsible for the peer review process. Yeah, I really like it.
It's different in different schools, so they've got different names in different schools. So I also work with the School of Science, and it's very similar to Steve's school in that it's got departments within the school. So we've got an associate dean for research, the same as in social sciences and humanities, but then each department has got a research coordinator, and it's their job to kind of keep an eye on things and circulate opportunities and that kind of thing as well. So
yeah,
it's got to be what works for that particular faculty or school, I think, depending on your structure.
Yeah, remember yesterday our dean said that we constituted a faculty research council, but the body never actually took any action. I hope we can employ the colleagues in the very right way, in that fine-tuning direction to evaluate, to propose how to improve some research, because there will be definitely, and there are people from all the 5 departments in the faculty. It's very important to keep them interdisciplinary. So if one from the bullseye and the other people from disciplines close to the one in question.
I think as well, if you're going to create roles like that, it's just really important to have either a terms of reference or a description about what that role would involve for those individuals, so that they're very clear what their responsibilities might be and how that might impact their kind of day-to-day work. So I think that's a really important thing to have if you're thinking about creating those roles.
Yeah. Any other questions, comments? We can see Steve is still here, so available for questions as well.
Silence.
Okay. Well, okay. We offered a lot of material, I guess, so there needs to be some time to process the information. But as I said, we're open to your questions, not today, not tomorrow, but every day, as long as this project is ongoing. So please just reach out to us through the website, through the address, the email address, whatever, because we're willing to share. And as I said, the presentations and the recordings will be available on our YouTube channel, and widely available. Well, if there are no comments and questions and any ideas to be shared, I do wish to thank you all for your participation, attention, and especially I wish to thank our speakers for sharing their views and insights and teaching us some nice new procedures that could improve our work. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Adam. Thank you all, dear colleagues, and have a great day. See you tomorrow, same time, same link, and a bit of a new topic, old new topic, which is so closely related to peer review. It's the approval processes, which we've touched upon today as well, but tomorrow in depth. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you
Bye-bye.
tomorrow.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.